I can still remember the feeling of excitement and anticipation that pulsated through my veins as I made my way through the crowded city streets towards the music venue. The sun had just set, casting a pale blue hue over everything as people flooded the sidewalks, their outfits a mixture of trendy bands, shirts, and risque clothing. I'd been looking forward to this concert for weeks, eagerly counting down the days until I could dance and scream my heart out to some of my favorite music. It wasn't until I got closer to the venue that I started to feel a tinge of unease creeping up my spine. The venue itself was an old, decrepit building that looked like it had been abandoned for years before being renovated into a concert hall. A banner with the name of the band hung over the front entrance, the neon lights causing it to flicker eerily in the night sky. I had been to plenty of sketchy venues before, but as I approached the entrance, there was something in the air that made me feel uneasy. It wasn't just the fact that the building looked like it could crumble at any moment. It was like a chill had settled over everything. I pushed the feeling aside and walked through the doors, my excitement rekindling as I heard the sound of the opening band blasting through the halls. The floor vibrated with the music, and I could feel the bass deep in my chest. As I made my way towards the crowd, the air around me grew thick and humid, making it hard to breathe. My palms started to sweat as I inched closer to the stage, the crowd growing more enthusiastic with each passing minute. It wasn't until the main act came on stage and the lights dimmed to blackness that I realized something was wrong. The music started, and I found myself rocking back and forth with the crowd, but there was something off about the atmosphere. The performers danced and twirled in front of me, but their faces were contorted into twisted masks, displayed without joy or emotion. Sweat dripped down their faces, a look of pain etched into their features as they played their guitars and drums. As the show went on, I couldn't help but feel like there was something off about the music itself. It began to sound discordant and off-key, almost painful to listen to. At some point, it started to feel like the screams weren't just coming from the stage, but from somewhere much deeper and more sinister. The crowd around me had devolved into a frenzy, people slamming into each other with reckless abandon. I tried to move back, but huge waves of people kept pushing me forward until I was smashed against the stage. And then, abruptly, the music stopped. There was no warning, no gentle fade-out, just silence. The lights flickered on, harsh and bright in my eyes as I stumbled back from the edge of the stage, sweat and blood mingling down my face. I would never forget the scene that greeted me. The band and their crew sprawled across the stage, their instruments still buzzing with electricity. Their faces were contorted in pain or terror, mouths stretched into ghoulish expressions. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur, and I knew in that moment that something evil had taken place. I crawled my way out of the building, gasping for breath and shaking uncontrollably. I felt like something had sucked the life and energy out of me, as if all that I had left was an empty husk. I never did find out what happened that night. Officially, there was an explosion, and everyone inside died. Unofficially, though, whispers talk of something darker and more sinister, something that doesn't belong in our world. All I know is that what happened that night changed me, made me more wary, more aware of the dark forces that might be lurking in the corners of our world. And every time I hear that band's music played, I shudder inside, wonder what it is that I missed, what evil was lurking just beneath the surface. I walked through the throngs of fans, excitement bubbling in my veins. The music was already pounding, echoing in my ears and rattling my bones. The stage was set and the lights were flashing, giving the whole place a surreal quality. I couldn't believe my luck, snagging tickets to the biggest concert of the year. It was the kind of night I'd been looking forward to for months, and nothing was going to get in the way of me having an unforgettable time. The crowd was huge, pushing ahead and surging towards the front. Bodies plastered together, gyrating in unison, moving to the beat of the exquisitely blended tunes from the speakers. I marveled at how the beats seemed to drive people into a frenzy. Dressed in all my finery, I pressed deeper, eager to get closer to the stage. The crush of people intensified as I pushed forward. As we approached the barricade separating us from the performers, the voices of hundreds combined and thundered. In that moment, I felt a sort of connectedness with the fans around me, something I never felt before. We were a unified force, driven by the music. Suddenly, a pang of uncertainty hit me. I looked around and felt horrified to see that everyone around me has begun to look like ghostly figures. Faceless, lost in the pulsing beat of the music that threatened to drown everything out except themselves. I shook my head involuntarily, trying to dispel the feeling of unease that coursed through me. Until then, music had always been my solace, the sanctuary from reality. But something about this concert felt different. It had an off-kilter energy that set my nerves on edge. And then it began. The lead artist emerged onto the stage, basked in the light of 1,000 beams of light. The cheers became deafening, a roar of pure approval shaking the atmosphere. The singing started almost immediately. It was transporting, enchanting, and exhilarating. Everyone in the room seemed to disappear into the sound, losing themselves in the unreality of it all. In those first moments, I was too carried away by the music to pay much attention to what as the show progressed. An unsettling feeling grew within me. The lights that had seemed so magical before now seemed to pulse in wicked patterns that seemed all too familiar. The music took a dark turn, and suddenly I found myself surrounded by people lost in a kind of frenzied desperation. The lyrics shifted into something insidious, containing a powerful command, driving the audience like puppets on strings. I tried to cover my ears, but the music was somehow everywhere. And then I saw it. Behind the lead artist, dark shadows writhed, their vague forms wreathed in smoke. Panic overtook me as the shadows rushed forward, overtaken by rage. I fought against the mob, elbowing and shoving towards the exit, but the shadows swarmed towards me, their seething anger palpable. Screams filled the room as the audience writhed under their influence, bodies slamming harder and harder against each other in thrumming sync. I'm not sure exactly what happened next. I might have hit my head, or maybe the shadows had finally gotten to me. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the ground, surrounded by strangers trying to help me. They looked like they were made of shadows, with thick tendrils of fog streaming from their bodies. I knew I had to get out of there, somehow. Days have passed since the concert, and the memory of the shadowy figures still haunts me. I can't shake off the feeling that they had intended to harm me or worse. Friends warned into attendance defense, and warrant I report the event to the authorities, scared for whatever evil might have tainted that concert. No longer certain what happened at that show, I can only speculate that something sinister must have taken place, hidden behind the veil of sound and light. And I fear I may never again find sanctuary within the calms of a music concert. I had always dreamed of going to a massive live music concert. The thrill of being surrounded by thousands of people, all singing and swaying to the power of the music, was an experience I absolutely had to have. So when I heard that Deborah Ambrose, my favorite rock musician, was going to perform at the local arena, I knew that I had to be there. I got myself a ticket and counted down the days and weeks until D-Day. Finally, the day arrived, and I psyched myself up for what I was sure would be the greatest night of my life. I put on my best outfit, hopped into my car, and made my way to the arena as early as possible. I didn't want to miss a thing. The parking lot was a chaotic mess of vehicles and excited people. I could hear fragments of Deborah's music floating through the air already, electricity making my heart race. I found a spot and hurried into the crowds of fans hurrying towards the singing songs. The arena was massive, and I couldn't believe how full it was. There were thousands of people all over the place, a sea of humans in various stages of revelry. The scintillating lights of the concert stage were a sight to behold, and the excitement was palpable in the air. The band started their first song, and as soon as the audience roared in approval, I could feel my whole body resonating with the same energy. The bustling sounds of the crowd, surrounded by a fantastic melody. It was transcendental. However, soon there were a few things that started bothering me. There was a low murmur that filled the arena between song breaks. chatter between songs that sounded strange in comparison to the pumped-up anthems and energetic crowd roar. It took me a few minutes to realize that mixed in with the humdrum of the listeners were whispers. They were hard to discern, indistinct as if muffled from a considerable distance, but soon I realized they were different altogether. I saw that the whispers didn't come to a pause, even when the music was incredibly loud, or when large portions of the crowd were singing along. Tension began to grow in my stomach, slowly building, and as the concert went on, the whispers started to become more and more distinct. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it sounded like a chant, a solemn chorus that seemed to echo through the entire arena. I started looking around me, trying to identify where the whispers were coming from, but all I could see were people singing and bouncing with cheerful abandon. The whispers were everywhere, teasing me, mocking me. I began to feel disoriented, unable to distinguish between what was real and what was illusory. My muscles began to tighten with dread. Suddenly, the lights on the stage started flickering and then dimmed out entirely. I heard a massive sound of something shattering, heard the clamor of panicking voices. Suddenly, I was trapped amidst a squirming throng of attendees, all trying to push their way towards the exit. It was then that I caught glimpse in of the corner of my eye, a ghostly apparition looming over the crowd. Translucent, the fluttered over all of those screaming for safety. It garbled something incoherent, yet somehow driving me to panic even more massive. In the dark chaos of people shoving and trampling, I lost my balance, falling on the ground in throbbing pain. I smelt burning hair and felt a sharp impact on my face. It gets cooler, then it opens to dark, cloudy sky, and I look down at overcome with fear with the realization it was now me, unstuck in time, was one of those echoes cursed to spend the rest of time haunting that cursed concert, adding to the ceaseless chorus of deafening whispers ringing in the ears of those trapped by their greed for music. And now, as the years stretched into immeasurable generations, I was still there, my chant and my curses distilled into an incredibly distinct whisper of which nobody except the endless darkness could still hear.